Folks, welcome to the Fry My Calamari Show. Good to be with you folks on this lovely Tuesday, April 8th. And we're just going to be doing a quick stream. We might be doing a afternoon stream and then a evening stream. A little split stream just because I have something I have to go do in a couple hours here. But just wanted to hit on the news today. Still, the biggest story going on would be the Trump tariff situation. And we have a lot of confusion going on and not a lot of unity with the messaging from the Trump administration. Pretty much the messaging is there's going to be a little pain. There's going to be what did Trump say? He said sometimes you have to take a little medicine to feel better when you're sick. And of course, he's talking about the economy being sick. Now, even being as gracious as you can with Trump's strategy, his long-term strategy with trying to renegotiate the fact that the whole world's been ripping us off. The whole world's been ripping the United States off, even though we are really the ones that have set up the entire globalized market. We have really had probably more say than anyone in how the global trade agreements have been structured. And now Trump wants to have everyone believe that we've been getting ripped off. And unfortunately, reality just does not match what Trump says. His entire concept of trade deficits is BS. But let's get right into it. Let's get right to Elon. He's been one of Trump's biggest advocates, and vice versa. Trump has been one of Elon's biggest advocates, and yet we have a disagreement, maybe the first real disagreement between him and Trump. And I mean, he has a point when it comes to free trade. Republicans and conservatives are supposed to be free trade advocates, since we're using that word. They're supposed to be cheerleaders for free trade, and yet Trump is doing some very protectionist, very sort of central planning type of activity with these blanket tariffs. Kind of weird. But let's see what Elon had to say. I think this is from Breaking Points.
They should be allowed to do so, in my view.
Let's turn now to some internal divisions inside of the Trump administration. Elon Musk, allegedly the most powerful person who was currently in the Trump administration, is majorly counter-signaling the Donald Trump tariffs. He appeared recently in an interview with respect to Europe, where he has been speaking against tariffs and what he would like to see as the end goal. Let's take a listen.
I'm hopeful, for example, with the tariffs, that at the end of the day, I hope it is agreed that both Europe and the United States should move, ideally, in my view, to a zero tariff situation, effectively creating a free trade zone between Europe and North America.
He said, at the end of the day, he would hope. So the operative term there is at the end of the day. So what is the end of the day? Is it when every country has restructured their trade deals? When is the end of the day? When do we get to this free trade when the tariffs are lifted? It doesn't seem like Elon has been let in on any sort of part of the strategy, and you would think, him being a part of everything thus far, you would think Trump would have gave him the messaging or the strategy, or at least enough of it to know what to say. And it doesn't seem like there's any unity on this plan, on this strategy.
That would be that's what I hope occurs. and also more freedom of people to move between Europe and North America, if they wish. If they wish to work in Europe or wish to work in America, they should be allowed to do so, in my view.
Is he talking about immigration, or is he talking about the work visas? This doesn't sound like it's in step with what Trump says at all.
So that has certainly been my advice to the president.
Obviously,
I kept thinking this little block on Elon's face, or on his head. I thought he had the it's just like a glitch in the it's just my god, I can't even think of the word, but pixelation, you know, from the algorithm or whatever. But I thought he had Neuralink installed. That's what it looked like. Like, dude's already got his chip implant.
Between Europe and North America, if they wish. If they wish to work in Europe or wish to work in America, they should be allowed to do so, in my view. So that has certainly been my advice to the president.
Obviously, that's not what the president has taken in terms of his advice. And Elon is now openly at war with Peter Navarro, who is Trump's trade advisor and definitely the person where a lot of these formula and this idea came from. Put this up there on the screen just so you guys can see. So Navarro gave an interview where he was responding to some of Elon's points. Elon replied, "A PhD in econ from Harvard is a bad thing, not a good thing. Results in the ego and brains are greater than the problem." He replies, "Navarro is 100% correct. PhD or no PhD, just obsessed with trade for quite a while." Elon, quote, "He ain't built shit." Here is Peter Navarro's response.
I don't get if he's trying to sound cool or what, talking like that. I guess since he's making fun of him for going to Harvard, he has to sound as dumb as possible when he talks. He ain't built shit. Shoo-wee, boy. You dumb college boy, you ain't built shit. Shoo-wee, boy.
Let's take a listen.
Can we go back to Elon Musk for a second? Because I'm glad that you brought that up. He also took a shot at you personally on X, and he's going against the administration with respect to the tariff policy. The president has said in the coming months he may leave the administration. Peter, is there a rift internally?
No, I mean, Elon, when he's in his Doge lane is great, but we understand what's going on here. We just have to understand, Elon sells cars, and he's in Texas assembling cars that have big parts of that car from Mexico, China. The batteries come from Japan or China. The electronics come from Taiwan.
Elon ain't built shit, huh? It's all getting built in other countries. Sure seems like a good point that he's making there. It appears Elon ain't built shit, including his companies. You know, he always swoops in, becomes the front man of these companies and builds up their profile, however much credit you want to give him as the quote-unquote founder of Tesla and SpaceX, all these companies. He didn't build shit either. It's just so funny how ridiculous and fake Elon is, especially with he faked being good at video games. He couldn't even build a real player for a video game. What was it, Path to Exile? I don't know anything about that game, but I know in general to be a pro at any of these games, you have to play them like non-stop every day. And apparently Elon was paying someone to do that, to rank him up. I mean, that is truly insecurity at its highest level.
And he's simply protecting his own interests, as any business person would do. We're more concerned about Detroit building Cadillacs with American engines. And that's what this is all about. So it's fine. There's no rift here.
There's no rift, Chris. So who do we root for? Is this an Iran-Iraq situation?
Oh,
we wish both sides the best of luck.
Yeah.
Is that where I don't know. He's not wrong in terms of Elon's incentives. What's Tesla stock at?
But here's the thing. Here's the thing, though.
-9 today. Good Lord. Yeah.
Tesla has got lots of issues with Tesla, mostly Elon's leadership and the union busting. But they have gone out of their way to source parts domestically.
Yeah, they are made in America. Beyond the battery, it's the more made in America car than GM.
I want you to think about what Peter Navarro was actually saying here.
Yeah.
I mean, if he's saying that because all companies have their parts manufactured outside the United States, that's not a good thing. Not at all. Plus, the domestic companies haven't even been truly domestic since the 2008 auto bailouts. People forget that the auto companies were bailed out, and it wasn't just that they were bailed out. They had foreign ownership come in and take over, and they had government ownership come in and take over. Although I don't know if that maintained and stayed ownership. I'd have to look into that, but I believe so. I believe like Mazda, several companies bought out American companies. So talking about domestic auto manufacturing is kind of a joke nowadays.
Because if their policy was going to do what you're saying this policy is going to do, Tesla should be a huge beneficiary.
Great point.
They're an American-made car. This should be great. Elon should be celebrating. This would be in his, and the fact that for even Tesla, which has done everything they can to have a supply chain that is more or less here in America, that for even them, it's going to be devastating and a real problem, and Tesla stock is falling. That, you know, there's all sorts of reasons Tesla stock's been falling, but the latest one is certainly related to the tariffs, as the rest of the market is in free fall at the moment. So it's such an admission that even for a company like Tesla, this is going to be extremely bad for business. As far as Elon's ideology, you know, we noted, I don't think this got nearly enough attention at the time, when he was out there praising Javier Milei, who's anarcho-capitalist, you know, hardcore libertarian leader of Argentina, praising him for rolling back tariffs. And we noted that right away. Like, that's very different from what the Trump plan here is ultimately. Elon also had gone to war over, you know, H-1Bs with members of the sort of like Steve Bannon type MAGA portion of the Republican base. At that time, he won the fight for Donald Trump's heart. Trump basically, you know, completely.
See, that's another area that's ultimately going to hurt us. Even though Trump says we do want people, we need people, they just need to come here the right way. Ultimately, his base and people high up, you know, that represent the talking heads that represent his base, they don't want any immigration. They want to completely limit immigration as much as possible from other countries. And I think a lot of these people do understand that we need growth, we need manpower. Just in general, that's like one of the biggest drivers for growth is human manpower. And so even though a lot of his people understand that, they're still they in their heads think that magically white birth rates are going to increase, or they're going to encourage them to increase, and somehow that they're going to be able to catch up and make up for the lack of immigration into this country that they're trying to create. And the bottom line is we need a heavy flow of immigration to make up for an aging population and a birth rate that's not going to magically catch up. We need the immigration. We need it to be fast-paced. We need it to be better than the system is now. But we can't have limited immigration, or it's going to slow down our growth. Now, there's lots of other things that need to be fixed, but this is going to be a problem that ends up hurting America in the long run, this Trump policy of limiting immigration.
Completely sided with him in that particular battle. That's not going to be the case in this battle, because Trump has just decided this is happening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, eventually it's going to be the compromise from the right wing is going to be some massive H-1B visa situation. But currently his base and people like Steve Bannon are fighting against even that, because they just don't want those They don't want foreigners here, period. And there's not some magic way to make up for manpower when you're trying to grow your economy.
Period. End of story. So, question mark what this means for the future of the Trump-Elon relationship. Last week, we talked about the fact that Trump was saying, hey, Elon's going to be out in a few months. Elon has already completely changed his political stripes. You could see him if the Democrats go back to being like a total neoliberal, like they're renegotiating TPP or whatever. Maybe Elon's going to come back to the Democratic Party. I don't think that any Democrat should ultimately want that, but who knows what the future is going to hold. But, very noteworthy given how much power Elon has and how Peter Navarro really is the sort of hardest core ideological.
All right, moving on. We kind of get the idea from Mr. Elon. That's not good. Let's hear from Mr. Legal Eagle. Let's get the lib take. Mr. Lib. I wasn't subscribed. Go ahead, like and subscribe. This is how to stop the tariffs. From Legal Eagle, let's see what he has to say on the topic.
On April 2nd. Wall Street is reeling, stocks are in freefall. The S&P 500 had its worst day in 5 years and continues to tumble. Between filming this and when we upload, there's no possible way to predict how much worse this is going to get. So I'm just going to point here and editors just let people know how bad things are. But there might be a silver lining. The authority that President Trump used to implement these tariffs is extremely dubious, and it's possible that courts might step in and overrule them. Now, if I was a betting man, I'm not sure I would bet against the tariffs, especially with this particular Supreme Court. But by the same token, there is a decent chance that these tariffs get overruled. So let's talk about what happened and what's going to happen. On April 2nd, from the serene backdrop of the White House Rose Garden, Trump dropped an economic bomb with reverberations felt around the world. During an announcement he dubbed Liberation Day, for reasons, Trump declared the imposition of sweeping tariffs against our country's trade partners, which unleashed global panic and confusion over how these tariffs were calculated and the immediate international threats of retaliatory measures. In fact,
yeah, from everything I understand, the calculations he used were totally jacked up and not correct. So he totally fluffed the numbers, made them totally exaggerated. We'll see if he gets into any of the technicalities of that. I hope I'm not going to get claimed for playing him. We'll see.
The very next day, Chinese lawmakers, for when celebrating a national holiday, to hit back, imposing a brutal 34% tariff on all American imports that mirrors the tariffs that President Trump ostensibly put on Chinese imports. And so the U.S. stock market crashed even further. Apple, for example, lost $311 billion in market value. Tesla lost $143 billion in market value, and the bloodbath continues. But Trump and his administration are telling Americans to just take a big picture view, because we're definitely headed for a glorious stock market boom any day now. Just trust me, bro. Yes, that's right. Trump wants us to believe that an economic death spasm rivaling the COVID pandemic will somehow inure to our economic benefit. Trump himself has likened the wounded economy to a
Yeah, and that's just the thing is even COVID, which was what they called a K-shape, it was a quick recovery. It wasn't instantaneous. And then what followed, because when you have a big drop like that, even if you have a recovery that's fast, that drop and then the increase in demand, it creates all these problems, which basically end up being inflation and high prices.
Patient recovering from a traumatic operation. He took to Truth Social to proclaim, quote, "The operation is over, the patient lived and is healing." But in a televised speech, President Trump announced the imposition of a 10% baseline tariff on all foreign imports to the United States. Trump also proclaimed additional punitive customized tariffs on roughly 60 of the world's, quote, "worst offenders," or countries that Trump seems to think charge higher tariffs on U.S. goods out of malice, impose non-tariff barriers to U.S. trade, or have otherwise behaved in ways the administration feels undermines U.S. economic goals. But spoiler alert, for the most part, that's complete nonsense. But these custom-made tariffs include a 20% tariff on EU goods, a 46% tariff on goods from Vietnam, a 54% tariff on Chinese goods, which includes earlier tariffs, a 32% tariff on goods from Switzerland.
And does Trump really believe that some of these little countries like Vietnam and Thailand are going to be able to purchase as much things from us as we purchase from them. This whole idea that trade deficits are a bad thing is BS. It's just a representation of who buys what from who. When someone purchases a good, both parties win. It doesn't need to be equal. Trump acts like trade has to be perfectly equal across all countries, and that's just not possible.
A 24% tariff on goods from Japan, a 37% tariff on goods from Thailand, a 32% tariff on goods from Taiwan, a 49% tariff on goods from Cambodia, and a 50% tariff on goods from Lesotho. And on top of these sweeping measures, Trump confirmed the imposition of a new American 25% tariff on all foreign-made automobiles. Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick explained the tariffs as a way to get other countries to stop picking on us. And in a similar vein, Vice President Vance...
That's just too vague. And what he's doing is too extreme. What he's presenting as a plan is way too vague, and just the very concept that he's somehow gonna negotiate with like 100 countries at once and get like good deals, get like perfect deals that are like complex trade deals. It's not possible. So what is the real plan here? It's hard not to get conspiratorial and start thinking that chaos is the plan, that ultimately weakening the United States economy is the plan. Because I can't find anybody that truly agrees with him that is respected from an economic point of view, like including most of his own people.
Defended the tariffs as a way to ensure that foreign countries, quote, can't take advantage of us anymore. And Trump himself stated that he imposed the tariffs because global trade deficits were, quote, not fair. We're really not taking it anymore. So to usher in a, quote, golden age for America, Trump announced his newest executive order imposing what he called reciprocal tariffs, which are not reciprocal, as punishment for these made-up international trade crimes.
In a few moments, I will sign a historic executive order instituting reciprocal tariffs on countries throughout the world. Reciprocal, that means they do it to us and we do it to them.
Now, within hours after their proclamation, countries were scrambling to determine how on earth Trump had calculated these reciprocal punitive tariff rates. Vietnam's Deputy Minister of Finance pointed out that Trump's 46% tariff on Vietnamese goods bore little resemblance to Vietnam's 9.4% average levy on American goods. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez challenged the reciprocity of the figures Trump used to calculate tariffs against the EU, and Switzerland's President Karine Keller-Sutter told reporters that Switzerland cannot understand the calculations underlying its tariff rate of 32% because Switzerland doesn't have any tariffs against the United States. And Trump's Rose Garden speech gave little insight to how...
This is what I'm talking about. His chart was completely fake. So Switzerland doesn't have any tariffs at all, and he had them down. It's just a lie. Like, he is tricking. This is why it really makes me wonder if like chaos and weakening the economy on purpose is the whole idea, is the whole plan, because he's straight up lying about countries having tariffs on us when they don't. So what is the real reason for some of these tariffs? Make it make sense, Trump.
How the tariffs were calculated, pointing to a chart listing purported bad actors and the purported tariff rates that they were charging the U.S. Trump explained that, quote, for nations that treat us badly, we will calculate their combined rate of all their tariffs, non-monetary trade barriers, and other forms of cheating, which left world leaders scratching their heads. And it appears that journalist James Surowiecki was the first one to figure out that the Trump administration had relied on a simple, incredibly stupid calculation. All they did was calculate the trade deficit between one country and the United States and divided that by its exports to the U.S., which was a far cry from calculations based on tariff rates and non-tariff barriers. And as Ian Dunn summarized, quote, Trump's team appears to have taken the U.S. trade's deficit with the country and divided it by the country's exports. The U.S. has a $17.9 billion trade deficit with Indonesia, and Indonesian exports to the U.S. are $28 billion. They divided 17.9 by 28, got 0.64, and presented it as a 64% tariff. It's hard to state just how nonsensical that actually is. You might as well divide the numbers of apples in your kitchen by the number of bagels and use it to calculate your mortgage rate. To criticize it on political or economic grounds is too generous. It operates below the level of rational thought. James Zerwicki also explained, quote, "It's also important to understand that the tariff rates that foreign countries are supposedly charging us are just made-up numbers. South Korea, with which we have a trade agreement, is not charging a 50% tariff on U.S. exports, nor is the EU charging a 39% tariff. Oh, and if you're wondering why Lesotho
Just completely made up. I'm not lying. I'm telling the truth. The numbers are just completely made up.
had such a high
And it's like, oh, it just, they don't make big enough, they do not make a big enough deal out of this in the media. Like, the fact that he made up the numbers in that chart so that he could call it reciprocal tariffs, so that his base could say, see, they do it to us. We're just doing to them what they do to us because they're ripping us off, see? But then it gets back to, what is the real strategy? Why does he need his people to believe that this is a reciprocal trade situation? What is the real purpose of these blanket tariffs? It appears to be chaos.
tariff rate, it's because they produce diamonds, we buy their diamonds, and as a developing economy, they really don't buy anything from the US. So they're not charging the US a 100% tariff, there just happens to be a very large trade imbalance between the two countries. So after Trump presented his made-up trade deficit numbers, the Office of the United States Trade Representative later released its methodology, showcasing a mathematical equation, which critics have decried as, quote, what happens when you ask ChatGPT to make my wrong econ math look more scientific. And while this formula might look intimidating, as many have pointed out, two of the elements cancel each other out, making it nothing more than a trade deficit with the particular country divided by the country's exports. Now, I want to emphasize this point. The tariffs listed in Trump's chart are not the tariffs that countries were charging on U.S. imports. A tariff is a tax on imported goods. But by the Trump administration's own admission, the percentages were, quote, tariffs charged on the USA, including currency manipulation and trade barriers. So theoretically, they're adding together tariffs and quantified currency manipulation and quantified trade barriers somehow. Okay, but that is also wrong. That does not describe the percentages that are on that chart. The point of the formula that the Trump administration used, nonsensical or not, by their own admission, was to calculate what tariffs the U.S. would need to impose, or what change in tariffs the U.S. would need to impose, to remove the current trade imbalance with any particular country and bring the trade imbalance to zero. Now, a trade imbalance, aka a trade deficit or trade surplus, is simply the difference between the value of the goods and services a given country imports from the U.S. in comparison to the value of the goods and services that the U.S. imports from that country. Though, interesting to note, it looks like the Trump administration only looked at goods and not services, making any trade deficit look much bigger than it probably actually is. But in any event, there are lots of economists.
I mean, you can't get any more incompetent than this. Like, every step of the way, he either leaves something out, manipulates the numbers. I say he, whoever is putting these numbers together and creating these formulas. It's almost like Trump is right over their shoulder saying, no, fudge that number. No, let's bend that. Oh, let's leave that out so it looks different. I mean, it's every step of the way they are fudging the numbers and making it up. This is really good, and I like how technical he's getting. I'll probably come back to this for my evening stream, but I want to move along, because there's actually a lot of stuff with the, well, not, wait, where's the, so, it sounds silly, but there was an AI debate regarding the tariffs. And when you create these AI agents and you formulate them a certain way, oh, real quick, let's check in on Bernie and see if he's still alive.
In their primaries.
Talking about Israel. Hold on, let's listen to Bernie for a moment.
Out of the Democratic and Republican primaries. I would hope that that would be the case so that we can once again become a government of the people, by the people, for the people, and not a government run by the billionaire class. Mr. President, I trust that every American, and certainly every member of the Senate, understands that Hamas, a terrorist organization, began this terrible war with its barbaric October 7th, 2023 attack on Israel, which killed 1,200 innocent people and took 250 hostages. The International Criminal Court.
And let's not forget, that is not when the conflict started. That is not when it started.
Was correct in indicting the leaders of Hamas as war criminals for those atrocities.
But that is correct. It's okay to condemn Hamas for their actions, but also say it's not okay to kill women and children just to get at terrorists. It's also important to remember that if Israel or the United States is killing women and children, they are also committing terrorist acts. It isn't just whoever's declared terrorist by the United States, that's the terrorist. No, whoever commits terrorist acts is a terrorist.
Clearly, Israel had the right to defend itself against Hamas. But most Americans also understand that while Israel had a right to wage war against Hamas, it did not and does not have the right to wage war against the entire Palestinian population. And tragically, that is.
And remove them from Gaza and let America or whoever build over the graveyard of Palestinians. What a disgusting plan.
A horrible war where our people were killed or wounded. It would mean that over 25 million Americans would have been killed or wounded. In total, since this war began, 15,000 children in Gaza have been killed, and today there are some 17,000 orphans. But it's not just the dead and the wounded.
Get 'em, Bernie. Unfortunately, I doubt that will stop the sale of weapons from the United States to Israel. I wish it would. I really wish it would. But unfortunately, I don't think this administration is going to do anything about the genocide in Gaza other than to encourage it and speed it up and possibly start trying to develop Gaza. More on the tariffs. Here we are. Are tariffs smart? AI debates 10 best theories. I just thought this was interesting. We only have maybe 30 minutes left. This is shorter than I thought, but let's try to watch some of it.
We've configured advanced AIs into economic and trade experts. Then we gave them a debate forum and added 15 AI models to judge each round. No human emotions here, just solid arguments.
That sounds very interesting.
Stick around to see who wins, but don't cheat yourself by skipping ahead. We start by asking, are tariffs a smart economic strategy or a costly mistake?
Let me address that first. Tariffs often do more harm than good. They function as taxes, and consumers ultimately bear the cost through higher prices on essential goods like food, electronics, and raw materials. Britain's corn laws aimed to protect domestic farmers, but made food so expensive that riots broke out until the laws were repealed, leading to lower prices and increased trade. The Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930 is another cautionary tale. Its sweeping import taxes provoked international retaliation, causing global trade to collapse and worsening the Great Depression. Economic theory backs these realities.
And, we're in sort of like this stagflationary after effects of COVID. I still think we're dealing with that. And even before COVID, we were already dealing with this really lopsided economy. So it's very fragile. And now, you know, you're doing something as dramatic and extreme as what Trump's doing. It matches up with these cautionary tales. I mean, there's almost zero doubt that it's going to make things worse. Anywho, let's see.
David Ricardo's.
How good do you think the arguments are going to be for tariffs? I think, you know, it's going to be tariffs can work if you use precision. Trump is the equivalent of using a shotgun to do open heart surgery. You know what I mean? Like, it's too blunt. It's not going to work. There's just no way that he can make enough deals. There isn't enough art and there isn't enough deal to be made fast enough to get this entire global trade agreement done before damage and lack of growth can take hold. There's, you know, how are you going to stimulate domestic manufacturing or even any manufacturing in general if the whole global market is slowing down?
Principle of comparative advantage shows that nations prosper most when they specialize in what they do best and trade freely. Following World War II, nations that reduced tariffs saw explosive economic growth and rising living standards. While protectionism claims to protect jobs, it often backfires by shrinking trade, disrupting supply chains, and ultimately harming more workers than it helps. Tariffs may provide short-term government revenue, but in the long run, they stifle competition and innovation, making industries less competitive globally. Free trade isn't flawless, but it's a far more effective path to economic stability, growth, and shared prosperity.
Tariffs are often misunderstood. They're not just taxes, they're strategic tools that can protect emerging industries, correct trade distortions, and safeguard national security. History offers compelling examples. The U.S. Tariff Act of 1789 shielded young industries from British dominance, allowing them to develop into a robust industrial base, while Alexander Hamilton's 1791 policies and McKinley's late 19th century protectionism helped transform the U.S. into an economic powerhouse. This aligns with the infant industry argument. Just as training wheels help a child learn to ride, temporary tariffs can give fledgling industries the support they need to compete globally. Britain's Navigation Acts similarly.
Yeah, and I think that would be an example of a targeted, surgical, precision use of tariffs. That would be an example of that. That's not this sort of blanket tariff situation. It's a good example. It's an example of where I do think tariffs could be useful.
Strengthened its shipping and manufacturing, fueling the Industrial Revolution. In modern times, unchecked free trade risks hollowing out key sectors like steel, farming, and technology when foreign governments heavily subsidize their industries, as seen in China's overwhelming manufacturing dominance after joining the WTO in 2001. While tariffs may temporarily raise consumer prices, they prevent the permanent loss of entire industries, securing jobs and ensuring economic resilience in times of crisis.
Now let's move into the cross-examination.
You argue tariffs protect national interests, but don't they mostly just help a few companies while making life harder for everyone else? There's an economic idea called consumer sovereignty. It means markets should focus on what people want to buy, not what a handful of businesses want to sell. When we put up tariffs, prices go up. Think of paying more for shoes or bread. And that hits regular folks, especially poorer families who spend most of their money on basics. Economists call this a regressive effect. It's unfair.
And that's the problem. That is the contradiction with Trump's, you know, even if you believe that there can be a long-term benefit, it's universally agreed that there's going to be short-term pain, which even Trump has said on multiple occasions. But it contradicts with what he said during the election, which was that he was going to be bringing prices on everything down. Groceries. I won on groceries. It's a beautiful word. It's bacon, lettuce, tomatoes. So, Trump is always trying to have his cake and eat it too, but it's how we tell that he's lying. It's how we can tell that he was never being truthful about the real purpose of tariffs.
Fair, because it squeezes those with less cash harder than the rich. Studies of the 2018 U.S. tariffs showed they cost the average American household approximately $831 annually, a much higher percentage of income for low-wage earners than for the wealthy.
Consumer sovereignty sounds fair, but it only works if everyone plays by the same rules, and global trade rarely does. Countries like China manipulate currency and heavily subsidize industries, causing massive job losses abroad. America lost over 3 million manufacturing jobs since 2001 due to unfair trade practices. Tariffs can fight back through optimal tariff theory, allowing a powerful country, like Britain or the U.S., to negotiate better trade deals and prevent abuses. This isn't theoretical. The U.S. imposed tariffs on Japanese motorcycles in the 1980s, saving Harley-Davidson, preserving thousands of American jobs, and later allowing tariffs to be phased out once the industry stabilized.
And eventually, in the long run, Harley-Davidson failed. It wasn't built for the future. It wasn't built for the long run. I think it's I don't think it's failed, but basically, as a motorcycle company, it's failed. I don't know. I want to say it declared bankruptcy. It doesn't really matter for my sake of the argument, because even if they didn't commit or declare bankruptcy, I think they did at some point. I just can't remember if they got rescued and came out of it. But even before that point, they're a merchandise company. They're a swag company. Motorcycle sales became a small portion of their overall profits, and mostly selling t-shirts and belt buckles and stuff like that was most of their profits. Which is, whatever. They're still making money, or they were. I don't know if it was enough. Like I said, I can't remember if they. But again, helping a company in the short term may be a good thing, and there may be other good that comes out of it. But if they become reliant on that, which China, if you research, they especially in the electric car sector, they have a system in place. Like, these companies didn't even use that much subsidies individually, like less than what Tesla used in subsidies from the United States government. And they paid them back in record time, or in a very standardized, quick time. So they're expected to pay the government back. They're expected to get a good ROI. It isn't something where they just milk the government and then expect a bailout when they fail, or they expect complete protectionism, although I think they do get some of that. But again, it's surgical. And then they have a good system in place to where the companies are accountable for becoming successful. It's not allowed to become a crutch for them, which is the kind of corporate welfare that we have in America, where not only do we give subsidies in ridiculous amounts to different industries, but we also bail out these industries when they're irresponsible with their funds. So we have a completely corrupt system here. Now, anyways, let's get back to the debate.
It's about creating fair competition, not protecting inefficiency.
Optimal tariff theory looks clever, but it's...
Oh yeah, I just wanted to say that was another example that she brought up, the female AI, the girl AI, whatever, that was a specific use of tariff. So I will be very surprised if she comes up with an example of blanket tariffs being a good strategy in the past. I haven't heard it yet.
It's tricky to pull off and can blow up in your face. For it to work, a country has to be big enough to boss around world prices. And even then, other nations don't just sit there. They hit back with their own tariffs. Look at the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930. The US thought it could protect farmers, but Canada and Europe retaliated. Global trade tanked 66%, and the Great Depression got worse. Even recent examples prove this point. American farmers lost $20 billion in annual exports when China hit back against a slew of U.S. tariffs from 2018 to 2019. Targeted sanctions through the WTO would have achieved the same goals without the collateral damage. This is what economists call a beggar thy neighbor policy, trying to win by making everyone else lose, but it ends up dragging us all down.
There's just no need for the hostility, especially to allies and stuff. You can negotiate these deals and you can stimulate manufacturing. You can do all of these things through other methods that work much better. So that's, again, makes me think that that's not really his goal. And since we're talking about the retaliation, I thought I had. Now I'm not seeing it. Let me see. It's gotta be. Here we go. Maybe, oh, it's just an article. I wanted a good video. Real quick, since we're talking about it. Here we go.
New developments regarding the tariffs announced by President Trump, which prompted major sell-offs in U.S. and Asian markets.
The president's sweeping plan will affect nearly every country on earth, with the auto industry already feeling the impact of those new tariffs. Jared Hill live in the newsroom, and we're hearing an update right now about China's reciprocal.
Prompted new developments regarding the tariffs announced by President Trump, which prompted major sell-offs in U.S. and Asian markets.
The president's sweeping plan will affect nearly every country on earth, with the auto industry already feeling the impact of those new tariffs. Jared Hill live in the newsroom, and we're hearing an update right now about China's reciprocal tariffs against the U.S. Right, Jared?
Yeah, that's right, Chris and Mary. This came in within just the past couple of minutes here. The Chinese government is announcing its own reciprocal tariffs on the U.S. reciprocal tariffs. So we're talking 34% tariffs on American goods coming.
And this is a couple days old. I believe Trump has already added retaliatory tariffs to China's retaliatory tariffs. So we have an escalating trade war. This is not good. This is not a renegotiation. This is the opposite of not only what Trump said would happen, but it's the opposite of what our economy needs to happen.
Into China, and this is going to be something that starts on April 10th, they say, on top of a couple of other measures, as we are seeing a number of countries around the world try to figure out how to respond to this. The White House is looking at this, as well as the market volatility, as expected temporarily painful economic reset. Meanwhile, President Trump is not changing course.
You can't have a 10 or 15% market drop and then just say that's like a temporary little pain. Those are huge. Anytime you have like a 10% drop in the market, that's like a crash. And there's going to be some pain that comes along with that. It's not that when you say temporary, you're talking years. Years.
Turmoil after news of President Trump's tariffs. U.S. markets took a nosedive Thursday, but aboard Air Force One, the president's optimism sky high.
We have tariffs, they've been set, and it's going to make our country very rich.
Framing the taxes on imported goods as a bargaining chip.
The president's trade policy is going to do a lot of economic damage.
Okay, it's a bargaining chip. Do one country or one sector at a time, buddy. You can't do the whole world at once. That's... I mean, part of the deal. Okay, buddy.
With President Trump's 25% tax on imported cars and auto parts, U.S. automaker Stellantis announced it's temporarily laying off 900 employees at 5 U.S. facilities as a result of pausing production in
How many job losses has Trump caused since he's come into office? Way too many. Tons of, probably close to 100,000 federal workers, and now he's hitting just about every sector in the country. Already 1,000 plus layoffs in the auto, and people, oh, the tariffs haven't even hit yet. Yeah, companies have to plan. They can't just have dead loss. They have to try to anticipate. They have to try and do layoffs now. Ugh.
Some of its plants in Mexico and Canada. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney announced his own tariffs in retaliation to the U.S. move.
We take these measures reluctantly.
On Capitol Hill, Republicans and Democrats criticized the president's trade policy.
The president made one of the dumbest decisions in history.
As Trump allies work to calm concerns.
He's asking for and needs this space to flex America's muscle as the largest consuming nation in the world.
Asking for time.
He needs to feel powerful. He needs to feel like he's in control. He needs to be able to throw his little temper tantrum and get the whole world messed up. So he alone can fix the problem. So ridiculous.
All right, diving a bit more deeply, it looks like China also is going to be adding 11 American companies to its list of what they call, quote, unreliable entities, essentially barring them from doing business in China or with other Chinese companies. All the while, President Trump says more tariffs could be on the way, specifically looking at pharmaceuticals and computer chips.
And Jared, yesterday the stock market took the biggest hit since the pandemic after the announcement from China. We're seeing Dow futures drop even more.
Biggest hit since COVID. So, not the biggest hit under Biden's entire pregnancy. Pregnancy. Yeah, Biden's not getting pregnant anytime soon. Presidency. Not the biggest drop under his presidency. Biggest drop since COVID. Trump has the two biggest drops since 2008 under his belt.
As we await the market opening this morning, what can we expect today?
So based on what we are seeing across the world, really, is that there potentially or likely will be another down day for U.S. markets. We have seen the same with the London stock market, which opened up a couple of hours.
We thought it looked like it was gonna have a nice rebound today. I think it was up like 1,400 points up early. I want to say the S&P. No, maybe it wasn't the S&P. Maybe that was NASDAQ. Whatever. It was up. All the markets were up, and then crashed. Ended up. What did it end up at? Let's see. Oh my! It ended up in the negative, huh? Did it close for the day? Wow. Oh, wow. Let's take a little look. Look at that. The Dow down 320. So, I mean, not horrible. Less than 1%, but it's just adding to the losses. Adding to the losses over the past week and past month, and basically since Trump's presidency, huh? NASDAQ down 2%. That's significant, 335. And the S&P down 1.5%. So, just adding to the losses, especially when it looked like maybe there was going to be a rebound today. Nope. And looks like crypto is down as well. Yep, not looking good. Not looking good at all. Yeah, so a lot of people say, well, the stock market is not the economy, and that's true in a lot of ways. But it's mostly true when there's gains. When the stock market has gains, unless you're talking about your 401k or your retirement, which those people trying to retire right now are suffering big time. Unless you're those type of people, stock market gains usually aren't a big indicator for the how people feel in the economy. But when the stock market crashes, when it crashes hard, that is a big indicator because that affects everything. So people that say the stock market isn't the economy, when there's big crashes, there's going to be big reverberations that go through the entire economy. I wanted to get back to the AI debate. Yeah.
Doesn't history show tariff risks outweigh its rewards?
Smoot-Hawley was a disaster because it was extreme, with taxes averaging 40 to 50%.
Extreme. She said extreme. It was a disaster because it was extreme. What would you call what Trump's doing? Blanket tariffs on the entire freaking world. Yeah. I would say that's extreme.
On over 20,000 goods. But strategic protectionism transforms economies. South Korea and Taiwan used targeted tariffs after
strategic protectionism. Keywords there. Strategic protectionism.
World War II to build industries like electronics and automotive manufacturing. Within decades, these policies propelled impoverished nations into global economic powerhouses. As Thomas Sowell put it, the most basic question is not what is best, but who shall decide what is best. In strategic industries, nations must decide to foster their own growth. This is the infant industry argument. Carefully designed tariffs nurture young businesses like protective coverings help saplings grow into sturdy trees. Clear deadlines and monitoring prevent prolonged dependence. Done correctly, tariffs don't merely protect, they create globally dominant competitors.
The infant industry idea makes sense in theory, but in practice, those infants often never leave the crib. Governments aren't great at picking which companies will succeed, and protected firms can get comfy, focusing on what economists call rent-seeking, lobbying for more handouts instead of inventing better products. Rent-seeking occurs when companies spend resources.
Yeah, because that becomes part of their business strategy now. So why create a better product when you can just lobby the government to give you more protection? That's why tariffs are a very dangerous, double-edged sword.
Chasing government favors instead of improving efficiency. India tried this with its car industry for years. High tariffs shielded domestic manufacturers from foreign competition. The infamous Ambassador car remained virtually unchanged for decades under this protection, while countries with more open markets saw rapid innovation and price decreases. Without strict deadlines or tough oversight, protectionism can waste money and slow us down. Doesn't that worry you?
Rent-seeking is a real pitfall. Anytime government steps in, some will try to game it. But it's not unique to protectionism. It happens with tax breaks or bailouts too. The fix is clear rules. Set a time limit, like 3 years of tariffs, then you're on your own, and check progress along the way. Beyond that, for things like steel or medicine, critical national security assets, relying on foreigners can be catastrophic. This concept of economic security became painfully evident during COVID-19, when countries with domestic manufacturing capacity for personal protective equipment and medical supplies saved countless lives, while import-dependent nations were left begging for basic supplies. Protectionism here isn't about laziness, it's about national survival in crisis.
Almost halfway through our debate, we'll check in with our AI.
Or just realizing that, the medical world should be subsidized in general by the, allow insurance companies to exist for people that want to buy them and to allow competition to exist in the medical fields, but have a very strong universal healthcare system as well to balance that out. Realizing that you can't make human health and the health of your citizenry be just a profit motive based system. There's just certain things that we don't want to add profit motive to, which is healthcare, because it's going to price some people out. It's going to price a lot of people out. And you don't want to add profit motive to, let's say, the prison industry. You don't want, because then you're going to have lobbyists, and then you're going to have people seeking to fill up their hotels. It's basically what they're building. They're building high security hotels that they want to fill up, because the bigger and the more they fill up, the more money they're going to make. You don't want to have a profit system like that, because they'll literally be trying to create more criminals by creating laws that are more strict and put more people in jail. You don't want to create a system like that.
Judges evaluating the arguments so far. DeepSeek R1 currently favors free trade, citing its effective use of historical evidence such as Smoot-Hawley's global trade collapse, economic theory including consumer sovereignty and regressive impact, and modern data on...
That's interesting. DeepSeek is the Chinese AI model, and this is one of its agents in this debate, but even they say that tariffs are a bad idea.
Household costs from recent tariffs to illustrate the widespread harms of tariffs on consumers and economic stability. Meanwhile, Gemini Pro sees the pro-tariff debater ahead, emphasizing the strategic application of tariffs, national security concerns, and historical protectionist successes like South Korea and Taiwan, while acknowledging...
And I don't disagree in these specific cases where it's used surgically. It's great. I think it would have been interesting to add to this debate the specific scenario that we're seeing applied with the Trump administration. I think they should have talked about that. When was this? So we're going to finish this, and it's very interesting. This is from John Olkswick, so check it out. Are tariffs smart? AI debates 10 best theories. It's 3 weeks ago, so it is relevant. I wish they would have. I guess Trump didn't come out with his specific blanket tariff plan, so they couldn't anticipate that aspect yet. I would love to see them redo this exact same model, run it back with the Trump specific model of tariffs. Because I agree, in the surgical method of using tariffs, it works. Or it can work. It's got a much better chance of working, although there's lots of other methods as well that don't involve, attacking other countries. Sometimes you got to do a combination of things, like subsidies, tariffs, all of the above, but sometimes you can just do subsidies, trade agreements. You can negotiate. And the best way to do it, to get your leverage without doing damage, is to contact behind the scenes. Of course, Trump wants everything to be public, and you could have a phase 2 that would go public if it was necessary. But phase 1, you should probably approach the country, say, hey, here's what we would like to negotiate a new trade deal on regarding these sectors of the economy, A, B, and C. Here's where we think it's unfair. Here's the changes that we think could make it fair. Do you agree or disagree? And we can, for leverage, you throw on the table, well, if you don't agree to something close to this negotiation, then we're going to hit you with this tariff. Boom, there's your negotiation. Boom, there's your leverage. You have the leverage of the tariff without applying the tariff. Phase 2, you go public with it. Phase 3, if they don't negotiate, they don't budge, they're not coming to something that's agreeable, then you go forward with the tariff. Why wouldn't you have all those steps, and why wouldn't you have that precision of use? And so as to cause the least fluctuation in the markets, the least collateral damage. Why wouldn't you do that process? Doesn't make sense. All right, got about 10 to 20 more minutes before we take off.
Potential downsides like rent seeking. We'll reveal the full panel's verdict at the end.
Deciding what's essential sounds reasonable, but who draws the line? Politicians often bend to loud lobbyists, say steelmakers, while ignoring the fallout, like higher costs for car factories or builders that use steel. This is what economists call input-output linkages. When you protect one part of the economy, it can mess up others connected to it, like a domino effect. In the US, steel tariffs have saved some jobs, but made life tougher for more workers downstream. Reports estimate the increased costs driven by the 2018 tariffs resulted in 75,000 fewer manufacturing jobs in firms where steel or aluminum are an input into production. And those clear rules?
And I remember hearing about that from friends who lost their job. And that is exact opposite of what Trump says he's doing, which is to bring manufacturing jobs back. I don't know what to say, but the man literally does the opposite of what he says he's going to do.
With time limits, they almost never stick. The U.S. sugar industry has enjoyed temporary protections since 1934, costing consumers billions, while strategic stockpiling or targeted subsidies would address security concerns at a fraction of the cost. Doesn't that show protectionism's benefits?
Like I said, there's like quite a few other tools in the toolbox other than tariffs to accomplish these goals.
Get lost in the shuffle?
Input-output linkages are a real challenge, but tariffs can be crafted to limit the damage. Instead of broad protection, we can target tariffs on industries with fewer downstream dependencies or use tariff rebates for firms that rely on imported inputs. Consider Japan's post-war tariff.
I just have to say again, she's saying the exact opposite strategy of how Trump approached it. He obviously did blanket tariffs.
Strategy. After World War II, Japan used tariffs to protect finished goods like electronics while allowing duty-free imports of key components, rapidly building competitive industries without supply chain disruptions. Properly designed tariffs minimize harm while maximizing growth potential.
Even with careful tuning, tariffs disrupt the delicate balance of global value chains, a concept economists call vertical specialization, where different production stages occur in different countries. In today's world, a smartphone, for example, is assembled using parts sourced globally. Imposing a tariff on a single key component, such as semiconductors, drives up costs throughout the entire production network, slowing innovation and increasing consumer prices. Doesn't this interdependence suggest tariffs are outdated in a world of borderless production?
Global value chains are important, but they also expose us to external risks, like supply shocks or geopolitical leverage, that tariffs can mitigate. Enter the strategic trade theory. In high-stakes industries like aerospace or renewables, tariffs can capture billions in profits from foreign rivals to domestic firms, giving them a chance to dominate markets and invest in cutting-edge tech. In practice, this approach has been used by countries like South Korea, which imposed tariffs on imported cars in the 1980s, helping Hyundai and Kia become global brands. Boeing and Airbus also owe some of their dominance to government support, including tariffs that tilted the playing field. In a competitive
Yeah, and what's the result of Boeing today? They are a perfect example of someone who got lazy and relying on government subsidies and knowing they're going to get contracts. Perfect example of a company that's really started to go downhill, in part because of their government crutch.
World, isn't it naive to assume countries can thrive without pushing back strategically?
Strategic trade theory assumes governments can outsmart markets, but that's a tall order. Picking winners risks backing flops. Think of Europe's failed solar panel subsidies against China's cheaper production. Plus, it invites rent dissipation, where firms burn resources chasing tariff benefits instead of innovating. Rent dissipation occurs when companies spend resources lobbying for government favors instead of improving efficiency. The data backs this. Studies show trade openness correlates with higher R&D spending, while protectionism often breeds stagnation. Why gamble on government foresight when competition drives progress more reliably?
Competition is a driver, but unchecked, it can hollow out a nation's economic diversity. Here's where the economic complexity argument comes in. Countries thrive long-term by building diverse, interconnected industries, not just leaning on a few efficient ones. Tariffs can nurture this complexity, as Germany did with its chemical sector in the 19th century, using protection to foster a web of innovation that still pays off. Similarly, Ethiopia's use of tariffs on imported clothing has helped nurture its domestic textile industry, leading to a remarkable 50% increase in textile exports between 2015 and 2019. Without some shielding, don't we risk economic fragility and dependence on hostile foreign powers?
Economic complexity is appealing, but tariffs aren't the best way to get there. They often lock us into old industries instead of pushing us toward new ones, a trap called path dependence. Look at Argentina's tariff-heavy 20th century policies. Aimed at shielding local industries, they instead led to economic stagnation and a lack of innovation. As
Trump locking us into clean coal, clean, beautiful coal. No such thing as clean coal, by the way, folks.
companies became reliant on government support rather than competing globally. Modern growth comes from flexibility. Think Singapore's open trade and investment model with minimal tariffs. Isn't adaptability, not protection, the real key to a complex economy?
100%.
Adaptability matters, but tariffs can fund it through the fiscal capacity lens. By generating revenue, tariffs can bankroll public goods.
Give it a rest with the tariffs. She's not convincing me. No, I think they're both making good points. I think that her points are valid, but in every example, like I said, she's talking about very surgical, specific use of tariffs, and I'm not against that necessarily.
Like education or tech R&D that drive future competitiveness. Developing nations like India have used tariff proceeds to boost infrastructure, laying the groundwork for broader growth. Historically, before income taxes became widespread, tariffs provided anywhere from 50 to 90% of federal revenue in the United States and funded critical nation-building infrastructure that propelled America to global leadership. In a cash-strapped world, doesn't this revenue stream offer dual benefits of protection and investment that purely domestic taxes cannot match?
Tariff revenue sounds nice, but it's like trying to get a larger slice from a shrinking pie. In today's globalized economy, imports are tightly interwoven into international supply chains. So heavy tariffs not only disrupt these networks, but also shrink the overall value of imports. This makes it difficult to raise significant revenue without provoking retaliatory measures from trade partners. Plus, there's the deadweight loss problem. Tariffs distort prices, killing off some trade that would have benefited both sides. Deadweight loss is the economic cost of market inefficiency. Economists estimate this inefficiency often outweighs revenue gains, as seen with high tariff regimes.
And that's exactly what I think we're going to see with Trump's plan. I just want to call it right now. I think that he's going to stagnate growth. And in the best case scenario, we're going to see us break even. We're going to be right back where we started with very similar trade agreements, but he's going to lie about the numbers. He's going to fudge the numbers again. And, you know, maybe there will be some minor improvements or tweaks here and there. But obviously he's going to have to flip out of this so fast. It's not going to be some amazing complex deal with every country. It's going to be just like everything else he does, where we might break even, but he's going to lie about it and act like, you know, he fixed everything and he did this fantastic trade agreement with the whole world, and really it'll be like we just recovered the losses that he created in the first place. And then there's going to be this stagnated long-term effects from this crash too, because it doesn't just, the market doesn't just heal overnight. There's long-term reverberating effects from these type of crashes.
Teams in Latin America that stalled growth. Modern tax instruments like value-added tax, VAT, generate 5 to 10 times more revenue with dramatically less economic distortion. Unlike tariffs that tax only imports and create border friction, VAT applies evenly to all consumption regardless of origin, capturing a much broader tax base while maintaining trade neutrality. Why not use progressive taxes or trade agreements to fund progress without choking the market?
Deadweight loss is real, but your argument exaggerates its significance. You're correct that tariffs cause some market inefficiencies, like higher prices and reduced consumption, but you overlook how small these losses often are relative to broader economic gains. For example, targeted tariffs that temporarily protect crucial industries can create long-term benefits that outweigh short-term losses.
There it is again, folks. There, she said it right there. She's basically agreeing with him. She's basically giving up and conceding the fact that if it's a blanket tariff system, yeah, what you said is going to be true. But you're actually exaggerating your truth, because these specific tariffs in this specific scenario, applied surgically, will have greater gains than losses. Well, this isn't the scenario that we're getting with Trump. We're getting blanket tariffs. So we're going, the losses are going to bog down in any gains.
The revenue generated can fund investments that enhance economic competitiveness, ultimately offsetting the deadweight costs. While VAT may be efficient at raising revenue, it doesn't address unfair trade practices or protect strategic industries like tariffs do. VAT treats imports and domestic goods equally, leaving local industries vulnerable to predatory foreign competition from state-subsidized rivals. Tariffs can provide both revenue.
But that's why you just add subsidies. If you're really that vulnerable, you can add subsidies on top. But that way you're using money, hopefully, to drive innovation rather than depending on just not even having to compete with that market altogether. That's too much of a crutch.
And protection simultaneously,
can be.
Particularly for developing economies that need both fiscal resources and industrial development. Even with VAT, countries still maintain strategic tariffs for key sectors, precisely because they serve dual economic purposes that consumption taxes alone cannot.
Before we turn to our AI judges for the final verdict, each debater will deliver short closing statements.
Protectionism promises safety but delivers economic stagnation. The Corn Laws starved Britain's poor. Smoot-Hawley deepened the Great Depression through devastating trade wars. Free trade has consistently proven superior. Post-1947 GATT agreements slashed tariffs and doubled global prosperity in mere decades. While imperfect, open markets drive innovation, enhance productivity, and create more opportunities than protectionism ever could. Even temporary tariffs become permanent as protected industries grow politically powerful rather than globally competitive.
Strategic protectionism fuels dominance.
I have to say, great closing argument from the free trade AI. Now let's hear from the tariff AI.
Not decline. Britain's trade policies built an empire. America's tariffs forged the world's strongest economy. Today, as rivals manipulate markets and currencies, protective measures aren't just economic, they're essential for national security. Losing industries like steel or tech to foreign subsidies costs more than a slight price increase. It erodes our independence. Smart, targeted protectionism preserves jobs, secures critical industries, and ensures resilience against hostile powers. Free trade sounds ideal, but without safeguards, we risk economic fragility and foreign dependence.
As we wrap up,
yikes. Okay, she said it in the closing argument. She said it needs to be surgical. It needs to be specific. And again, I would love to see this entire debate redone with the specific type of blanket trade. I want to hear her argue for his style of tariffs and see if she can even do it.
the debate, we now go to our 15 independent AI judges who have evaluated the arguments. Claude thought the free trade side won by demonstrating how protectionism's theoretical benefits rarely materialize in practice, with protected industries typically engaging in rent-seeking rather than innovation, and with the broader economy suffering deadweight losses that consistently outweigh any narrow sectoral gains. In contrast, Grok disagreed, saying the pro-tariff argument offered a more nuanced and forward-looking case that balanced his.
And as we covered, Elon is against tariffs. And of course, Grok, which is Elon, his AI, doesn't agree with him. Not surprised.
Historical evidence with modern geopolitical realities. Their ability to address critiques such as consumer costs and rent-seeking while maintaining a focus on economic sovereignty and resilience gave them a slight advantage. However, the majority of 15 AI judges agreed with Claude, siding with the free trade position. Now it's your turn. What about you? Which side do you find more convincing?
So the free trade side won, even with her arguing with the tariffs being a good choice for specific. Yeah, it's like, I think tariffs, because of the way they work and the way that they are in sort of inherently antagonizing other countries and sort of treating trade as a zero-sum game, I think tariffs should typically be a couple of things. They should be rarely used. They should be a last resort, and they should be temporary. Boom. All of those. And everything should be discussed. Like I said, there should be like a phase 1, 2, and 3 of negotiations. And the tariffs are used as leverage, but only brought in at like a phase 2 or 3 of them being unwilling to negotiate. It shouldn't be this like sweeping. I mean, that's been what I've been saying the whole time. The main problem with Trump's tariff strategy is that blanket tariffs just don't work. They've never worked in the past. They make things worse, and the losses that we're getting now, it's very unlikely that the gains we get are going to outweigh those losses, at least not anytime soon. And unless they happen soon, Trump can't really take credit for it. We're looking right now, it might not be till the very end of his presidency, or if not after, before we get like a full recovery. I mean, I hope that I'm wrong. I really do. I hope I'm wrong about that. I hope it's much sooner. But we'll see. Obviously, there's we need housing, we need manufacturing, but if there's no growth, there's no demand. And then you have layoffs, you have all these other problems that can stymie the growth. Anyways, I got stuff I gotta do, so I'm gonna run, and I'm probably gonna come back tonight for an evening stream, or I might edit videos. I don't know what I'm gonna do yet. Anyways, Fry My Calamari signing out. Have a great evening, folks.